live at a critical time in human development, and what is decided over the coming months and years, I believe, will shape the course of history for generations to come. This is because we have this conflation, this coming together of a series of big challenges that either will lead to a resolution where we see the light and are able to forge a pathway to development for the world, to address climate change, and in the process learn to cooperate. And by learning to cooperate, create a more inclusive and sustainable world. Or we are going to be entering a period of escalating crises, which will lead to growing nationalism, protectionism, inequality, and a more divided societies around the world, and more divided societies leading to a more divided world, which in turn will lead to a weaker ability to manage our crises, be they health crises, climate crises, financial crises, or others. And so this is a critical moment. And at this critical moment, it's particularly important that UCT has brought together the various panels to think about this in the run-up to the United Nations General Assembly next week, the COP26 coming in a few weeks' time, and of course, an urgent need for action.
You know, the nature of a global agreement and a compact is that there will be a difference between what the global frame says and what is happening nationally. But more critically, and this is where the real challenge comes from, where the real rubber hits the road, where the implementation happens at the local level, whether it's local government, local enterprises, or communities, there's often a significant gap because the world is very complex, it is very diverse, conditions are very different, and that's a challenge in the framework. So when we're looking at the question of nexus, there's not only a question of the challenge of nexus across the SDGs, the targets and indicators, but also between the multiple levels at which these averages or statistics are actually thrown up and dealt with. And this is quite important because you can get to achieving what you want to at the national level on the average, but you can still have such high inequality that you leave, a quarter of your population behind.
In country after country, it is basically the action of poor people in communities that is the bottom line. So I'll cite one figure from the Moving Out of Poverty study that the World Bank did, where they asked people who had moved out of poverty, what was the primary reason? Was it a government program? Was it an NGO? Was it private sector, a faith-based group, a kinship group in another city? What was it? And 77% of the people said it was my initiative. And so actually supporting them, they have to put together their time. They have to figure out how to access these different things while doing the work that they have to do. And so sometimes that's forgotten. But I think we always have to remember that, and particularly women who basically often hold the whole family together. And that's a vital thing. And so building that into our frameworks means, very practically, making programs that don't require 6 trips to 6 different offices to access things that a household might need. It means providing packages that meet the deprivations they face. It means also giving them voice to articulate what their experience of poverty is. For example, in El Salvador, participatory work showed that violence and not having a place for your children to play and to drink coffee was a big deprivation of the poor that the government had not recognized. So that from the bottom up was built into their national poverty measure. So I really appreciate that, and I think that has to be an ongoing partner because they are the key protagonists when it comes to poverty.
Through these conversations, it became evident that African scholars, policymakers, and activists on the African continent need to build and take ownership of analytical perspectives that can guide policies and practices towards deepening democratic institutions, building ethical leadership, and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063. There are perhaps 3 significant outcomes that have emerged from our discussions. First, we have begun to understand that governance challenges on the African continent are complex and deeply integrated with the development context and the struggles for the democratization of African countries. Second, we have learned that the mainstream academic literature on good governance or democratic governance needs greater engagement with more challenging alternative concepts such as developmental governance that offer more feasible policy proposals that lead to effective developmental outcomes and transformation on the African continent. And third, the dialogue that this UCT SDG Summit has created has led to an impetus for a research network with leading African research institutions and think tanks to advance a number of key objectives.
Agendas 2030 and 2063 represent ambitious frameworks to address the interconnected and complex sustainability challenges that we're facing today. And we need new research and learning approaches that can be directly linked to policy and action. This means working with the diverse perspectives, knowledge systems, needs and interests of different societal actors, and we're all involved in this. Transdisciplinarity and engaged scholarship offer promising approaches to work beyond the academy and contribute to actions that are pluralistic, negotiated, equitable, and practical. So as a final thought, our vision would be communities of practice that nurture the critical skills and mindsets that enable the relational capacities, reflexivity, communication skills, and empathy that is required for transdisciplinary work.
As the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, we are Nelson Mandela's legacy organization that is dedicated to building exceptional leadership capacity in Africa. So Madiba wanted us to go and find the next generation of young leaders who really want to use their talents to say, how do we start to redefine the challenges and opportunities that we face on the continent? So I think this panel addressing this topic of partnership for impact, it's a really important moment, especially for the young generation who, of course, have inherited some of the challenges of the past and are now trying to figure out how do they follow Nelson Mandela's legacy, who advocated for unlikely partnerships. Madiba really believed in the power of bringing together different perspectives towards creating new possibilities. And so the partnership between Nelson Mandela and the Rhodes Trust, which is based in Oxford, was actually formed in 2003. And of course, over the years, it's really garnered a lot of very interesting debates about what does it mean for us to partner across seemingly divergent legacies? How do we battle this idea of the North-South partnership, the opportunities that exist there, and also recognizing that this partnership, in a sense, was created from a recognition, I think, from the Rhodes Trust about the global sense of responsibility to say, how do those who have power and resources really return some of those resources back to the African continent from where they originated from? But I think the most crucial question here when we think about especially these North-South partnerships is being able to have honest conversations to say, what is the opportunity here for us to really be conscious in thinking about how we redefine the power dynamics and the relationships that are inherent in these partnerships? Because I think I often find it very frustrating when I watch the kind of deals that are being made by our government with international partners, the compromises that have to be made if we're getting funds, and how do we really try and capacitate the next generation to say, well, we actually have a lot of resources and value to provide as the continent. And so if you're going to come and want to partner with us from the global north, then we have to be able to start recognizing the strengths that each brings to these partnerships, and also for us to actually really start building trusting relationships, trusting spaces where we can contest the dynamics, where sometimes it might feel restrictive, sometimes it might feel like there are attitudes that perpetuate colonial ways of engaging in partnerships. And I think it's important that as we continue to enter these relationships, they must be entered in from a place that allows Africa to be the one who's in charge of actually leading the discourse, directing how the development should happen, and that the international parties come in a way that is supportive.
With a colleague some years back, we did for the United Nations the 10 commandments of good capacity development. And I'm just going to read them quickly to you as a way of concluding my remarks. Don't rush is the first. We can't rush. This is a long-term process. Second, respect the value system and foster self-esteem. Because if you don't, you're just going to alienate people. 3, scan globally and locally, and then reinvent locally. So we have to be conscious that, we are not alone in this world, but yes, we have to know our reality quite well. 4th, challenge mindsets and power differentials, because the mindsets are really what has brought us where we are with all the problems that we are facing. 5th, think and act in terms of the sustainable outcomes. And this is very much a call for sustainable development goals to be seen from their resilience perspective. 6, establish positive incentives. This is pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? 7, integrate rather than replace external inputs. This is a way of saying, go and grab what is good. Ownership of ideas don't make sense. Just grab everything that is good, but reinvent again internally. 8, build on existing capacities rather than starting from scratch. We tend to be, very fond of, islands. We create all the conditions in one particular place. We call it, a center of this, exclusive this, excellence that. But the end result is that if it is not integrated in the fabric, it's not going to last. When the funding dries up or the support dries up, it's not going to last. 9, stay engaged under difficult circumstances. This is a tough one. We are not going to make it just because it's nice. We are going to make it because we are persistent. And finally, 10th, remain accountable to the ultimate beneficiaries. Let's not forget to whom we work. Thank you.
African challenges need to be met with African solutions. Solutions that are sensitive to the unique context of our continent. But more than that, Africans must lead change on this continent because it is our continent. We should lead change here, in our continent, and more broadly. We live in a globalized world. This means balancing an internal focus with an external view and recognizing the shared challenges we face with other regions around the world. In line with these various threads, there was an intellectual and ethical test throughout the summit. How do we see the enormity of the challenge before us with cold-eyed clarity, yet remain energized to meet it head-on with dynamism and resilience? We need to be realistic in acknowledging the very real constraints we face, not least, which is a funding crisis. But we need to keep connected to the kind of energy we've seen in this conference to keep moving forward with purpose. And furthermore, how do we advance new academic research agendas while also speaking about the issues we face with humanity? Even with love. This is also something that has come through in so many engagements over the past few days. The enormous love many of us have for this continent and the importance of human-centric approach. There is no doubt that we have a long way to go to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. However, this summit, I think, has given us all renewed impetus to do the work that must be done in a rich network of partners who can work together to shape the Africa we want.